The dispatcher said the call came in just after midnight, a man whispering instead of speaking, his voice tight like he was afraid sound itself might give him away. And at first it sounded like a prank because he kept saying he didn't know where he was, even though he was calling from his own phone. But then he explained he'd woken up to footsteps in his house, slow ones, deliberate, pacing back and forth above his bedroom ceiling, even though he lived alone in a one-story home. And as the dispatcher asked him routine questions, the man kept interrupting to say the footsteps would stop whenever he talked, like whoever was up there was listening, waiting. And when the dispatcher told him to leave the house if he could, he whispered that the doors wouldn't open anymore, that they felt locked from the outside, and that's when something changed in his voice. A quiet panic creeping in as he said the footsteps were getting closer, no longer above him but right outside his bedroom door. Slow, heavy, dragging like something unfamiliar with how legs were supposed to work. And then the dispatcher heard it too, a soft scraping sound over the phone, followed by 3 gentle knocks, spaced too evenly to be human. And the man started crying, saying no one should be able to knock from inside the house because his bedroom was at the end of a hallway with nothing but walls behind it, and when the dispatcher asked who was knocking, the man went silent for several seconds before whispering, "It knows my name." And the dispatcher asked him what he meant, but instead of answering, the man tilted the phone and the dispatcher heard a second voice, low and wet, trying to mimic the man's breathing, inhaling and exhaling just slightly off rhythm, like it was learning, practicing. And the man whispered, barely audible, "It's been here before." And then there was a loud crash, the phone clattering to the floor, the dispatcher shouting for him to respond while heavy footsteps crossed the room, followed by a dragging sound like something being pulled away, and the call didn't end. It stayed connected for 6 full minutes, filled only with faint movement and that same breathing, slow and patient, until responders arrived to find the house empty, doors wide open, no signs of forced entry, and no trace of the man except his phone on the bedroom floor, still warm, still recording. And if you listen to the audio today, they say you can hear a third set of breaths start just before the line finally goes dead. The second 911 call came in during the quietest stretch of the night, when the room felt almost abandoned and the dispatcher had started measuring time by the hum of the fluorescent lights. And he noticed something was wrong immediately, because the line connected without the usual ring or greeting, just sound already spilling through the headset, a steady mechanical rush that took a few seconds to recognize as a car engine, smooth and constant, like the vehicle wasn't slowing or turning at all, and underneath it was breathing, slow and uneven, the kind that comes from someone holding themselves together by force. And when the dispatcher announced himself, calm and professional, the breathing hitched, followed by a long silence that made him repeat his greeting, until a man finally spoke, apologizing over and over, saying he didn't even know if this was an emergency, that he felt stupid for calling 911, his voice thin and worn down like he'd been crying for a long time before dialing, and he explained he was driving but didn't know where he was, which at first sounded like exhaustion or nerves, until he added that his GPS kept insisting he was only 10 minutes from home, the same home he'd driven back to from the same late shift for years without ever getting lost. And as he talked, the dispatcher could hear the tires humming against the road, no bumps, no braking, no turn signals, just endless forward motion. And he laughed nervously, embarrassed, saying he must be overtired because he'd taken this route hundreds of times. But something felt wrong tonight, because every street sign he passed looked familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, like he recognized the shape of the words, but couldn't remember what they meant. And when the dispatcher asked him to read one out loud, he went quiet for several seconds before admitting he couldn't, that the letters blurred the moment he tried to focus, like his eyes refused to understand them. And that's when his breathing started to change. Quicker now, tighter, as he said he'd been driving for almost an hour without seeing another car, Not headlights, not tail lights, not even parked vehicles on the side of the road. Just empty asphalt stretching forward under streetlights that flickered but never seemed to get any closer no matter how long he drove. And when the dispatcher asked about his fuel level, he hesitated before whispering something that made his stomach sink, that his gas gauge hadn't moved at all since he left work. Not down, not up, frozen exactly where it started, and as he told him to pull over somewhere safe to stop the car and turn on his hazard lights, he said he couldn't find anywhere to stop because the exits kept repeating. The same overpass, the same broken guardrail, the same faded graffiti. He was certain he'd already passed at least 3 times, and his voice dropped as he added that even the mile markers weren't changing anymore, stuck on the same number no matter how long he drove. And when the dispatcher asked him to slow down, to try turning around, he said he had already tried that, his voice trembling as he explained the road didn't change, that the headlights still pointed into the same darkness. And then, without warning, his tone shifted, calming in a way that felt wrong, almost thoughtful, as if he'd reached some quiet realization. And just before the line filled with static and the engine sound warped and stretched, he asked him one last question in a soft, curious voice that stayed with him long after the call ended. "If the road never ends," he said, "does that mean I never actually left?" The third 911 call started with screaming, not words, just raw panic exploding through the line, so suddenly the dispatcher had to pull the headset away, and when he demanded the caller slow down and explain, a man finally choked out that someone was inside his apartment, his voice shaking uncontrollably. And at first it sounded like a break-in, until the dispatcher asked where the intruder was, and the man whispered, "In the walls," quickly adding that it wasn't moving through them but standing inside them, because he could hear breathing coming from every direction at once. And as he spoke, there was a faint tapping over the line, hollow and uneven, like knuckles testing drywall. And the man said it started when his dog began growling at the hallway wall, then whining, then suddenly going silent. And when the dispatcher asked where the dog was, the man said he didn't know because his bedroom door had slammed shut on its own, and he was locked in the bathroom with the lights off, listening to the apartment breathe. And then the tapping stopped and turned into a slow sliding sound, like skin dragging across plaster, moving closer, and the man began crying, saying the walls were bending inward, bulging like something was leaning through from the other side. And then his voice dropped as he said it was copying him now, matching his breathing but half a second late, deeper and wrong. And when he whispered that it had learned his name and was saying it softly from behind the tiles, the screaming returned, followed by a violent cracking sound, and the call stayed open even after the man went silent, recording only a faint, steady breathing sound until officers arrived to find the apartment empty, the walls intact, the dog gone, and a phone on the bathroom floor still connected to 911,